Good morning and welcome to the Closers Inner Circle podcast. I am your host, Denise Griffitts, alongside my co host, Ben Gay III. And in our conversation today, we're going to tackle a common challenge that many business owners face, as outlined in the chapter Save as Much as You Want from the Closers Part 2, and that's on page 71. Now, we have touched on this a little bit earlier in the year, maybe even late last year, but it bears repeating. It's a good chapter. There's a lot of information in here. But this chapter focuses on a business owner who is currently profitable, but charging only half of what he should for his services. And I'm raising my hand. Been there, done it, doing it all over again. We all do it for some reason. And it goes on to say that most clients were on month-to-month agreements without formal contracts. And this is kind of back in the day when you could do a handshake and that it was all good. But that complicated matters, especially since the owner needed signed contracts according to his bank to secure a construction loan. So Ben, in this chapter, shares some very effective strategies for transitioning all clients to sign contracts without losing any of them. And I think that was a big part of the conversation. People, oh, I don't know, we've been doing it this way forever, blah, 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 blah. But you have to do what's best for you and for them. And we're going to talk about those strategies. So basically, what you need to know is how to raise prices to reflect your true value while maintaining strong client relationships during this process and without losing them. Ben, good morning. It's Wednesday. It's always good to catch up with you. And I know you have some questions from our audience.
I do, and good morning to you. A pleasure to be with you as always. Uh, and I've got a couple of requests, might be a better way to phrase it. One, which is funny, uh, a member of Gigi's family who will remain unnamed because I didn't give his permission to to name him. He said, "I remember when you joined the family." And he said, "Have you told your listeners about how anal you are?" And I said, "I guess it's come up a little bit, but why does it come up with you?" And because I am a list guy, you make lists, you do this, you do that, and so on. And he said, "Well, don't you remember the name tags?" And I said, "No." He said, "Well, it's been 30 years ago, but here's how it went, and the family still laughs about it behind your back. You joined the family. This is literally about 30 years ago, and we had a barbecue in your backyard. You and Gigi put on a big barbecue for us, and we were greeted when we came in with a table full of name tags and marker pens, so we could write our first name on it. Those "Hi, I'm so-and-so" name tags you have at conventions and so on. And I said, "Oh, yeah, I remember that." He said, "Well, what we found was funny. Gigi had warned us that you were wound a little tight and anal about some things. But what we found amusing was everybody at the party had known each other their entire lives. The only person some of us might have had a question about, who is that, is you. So the rest of us dutifully put on our name tags and went around saying, 'Oh, hi, Aunt Betty. Good to meet you.' "Hi, Alice. It's an honor to finally meet you." And some of them, it was the child talking to their parent, "Hi," instead of mom. "Hi, Alice," reading off the name tag. And he said, "We still get a kick out of that. If somebody says to us, 'What's Ben Gay like?' Well, let us tell you about the name tags." He's, oh, go ahead.
I was going to say, but you have face blindness, so that was probably helpful to you.
Oh, it was. Yeah. Some of our listeners may not know that I have face blindness, and some people have it where they don't recognize themselves in the mirror. I have it where people sort of look vaguely familiar, but I don't really know who they are unless they're where they're supposed to be. David at the post office works at the last stand, farthest from the door. That's the only place. I've never seen him anywhere else but there. And so when I walk in, that's David. If you put David in the grocery store, I'd probably walk right past him. And although I've been dealing with him for 30 years, and when I'm in town every day, every business day, and some Saturdays, and I still don't know him. And then there's this famous story of my not recognizing a former wife in broad daylight, sitting at the same picnic table with her. And but as I've told you, Denise, in my defense, I was only married to her for 10 years, and it takes a little
Oh,
while.
sorry. I just, I was trying to drink some water and I think I just made a mess on my microphone.
The just it takes a little while to dial in, and apparently 10 years wasn't enough. But you know, I didn't even think about that when I started telling the name tag story. Maybe that was my way of going, so I know who these people are, because there were, I don't know, 40, 50 people there, and I hadn't met many other than Gigi and her mother. So anyway, they still laugh about it. And then I got in a casual conversation with Jimmy Rucker, my first business partner, high school running buddy, and the greatest salesman I ever worked with. We were chatting the other day, and he said, have you told them some of the goofy things you've done? It started out we've done, but then we decided that most of the things Jimmy and I did aren't suitable for a podcast about business. You know, we were young, drinking beer, chasing girls, and getting in trouble. But he said, "You've led an interesting life. Why don't you tell them 3 or 4 things?" And so I said, "Well, tell me which ones you like." And there were several, but the ones that survived the cut were William Penpatrick, the owner of Holiday Magic Cosmetics, my early mentor, and I would go out. We had a little Air Force 42 airplanes, the only flying B-29 in the world at the time, a Learjet, a Gulfstream. Most of the planes numerically were in our flying school, so we could make some money, cover up for Bill's hobbies. He spent more money on airplanes than most people make in a lifetime. So anyway, we go out, we get in the Stearman, a bi-wing, picture a World War I, World War II trainer, and we go out to fly over the San Francisco Bay, and we go out by the Farallon Islands. That's, I think, 20 miles outside the Golden Gate, and it's a safe place to do aerobatics. We do our aerobatics and fly around, and then we're coming back from Marin County, which meant a way to get there was to fly over the Golden Gate Bridge. San Francisco's on your right, take a left, go up to Marin County. And I'm looking at the bridge as we approach it, and I was in the front seat. I turned to Bill in the back seat, and I pointed down at the bridge and did the Indian hand signals for let's fly under the Golden Gate Bridge. Now, I'd driven over it. I live in Marin County. San Francisco's right there. I had driven over it thousands of times because of our little fleet of boats. I had sailed under it, motorboats mainly, but sailed under it hundreds of times. But you're not allowed to fly under it. Needless to say, I had never done that. But I did the signal, and I was really laughing. And Bill nodded in agreement. And I thought, oh, my God. And so I turned around in my seat. I looked forward as we dropped down, and we flew under the Golden Gate Bridge in the World War II Stearman. And it really wasn't as dangerous as it sounds. The bed of the bridge, I think, is 700 feet above the water or something like that. It was plenty of room, but it was illegal, one, and two, probably not the best way to spend an afternoon. Years later, and then we flew back and told our flight people what we had done. They said, all right, put it in the hangar and let's cover it up. We put the Stearman in the hangar, covered it with tarps, and there it sat for a couple of weeks, waiting for the sheriff or whoever would be looking for us to tire of the search, and never heard any more about it. Then one day in the Learjet, we're flying over St. Louis. Either had just taken off or were landing, I really forget. And our real pilot, Art Stagg, was with us. I said to Bill, I was sitting in the passenger compartment. Bill was sitting co-pilot. Art was flying the Lear. And I said, Bill, why don't we do with the St. Louis Arch what we did with the Golden Gate Bridge? And he said, yeah. And he turned to Art Stagg and said, all right, Art, fly through the arch in St. Louis. And the gateway to the west, I think it's called. And fortunately, that one was cut short. Mark said, you two have a good time, and this is a hobby. Flying around is a hobby to you. This is my career. I have 10,000 log miles, and probably twice as that much that could have been logged. And the reason I make a nice living is because of that. If I lose my pilot's license, you two wouldn't even hire me, never mind anybody else. So you can scratch off the St. Louis Arch from your bucket list. I don't think it was called that in those days, but from your bucket list. And then, so we didn't do that, but we were close. And then one day in the Stearman, I'm sitting on my little parachute, and I said we were out over the golf course, and I said, Bill, I yelled back to him, Bill, I want to jump. But keep in mind, I've never been to parachute school. It's just I happened to have a parachute on, and beneath us was this big grassy area, an 18-hole golf course, Peacock Gap golf course. And I said, I want to jump. And Bill nods, okay. So I climbed out of my seat, walked down the wing. I'm at the leading edge of the wing. He's at the back edge of the wing in his little seat. And I said, is this what you pull? There was a ring that looked sort of like that's probably what freed it. And he said, that's what I was told. And I said, okay. Now, do these chutes work? He said, I
Oh,
don't know.
jeez. You should have
He said, I
asked
don't.
that first. You're
Yeah,
doing
I
this
said,
backwards.
yeah. I've lived my life with ready, aim, fire. I live my life with fire. Ready, aim. So I said, do these things work? I'm yelling at him over the wind and all. And he says, I don't know. They came with the plane. This is a World War II Army trainer. So we're talking at the time 30, maybe 40 years old, and the chutes came with the plane. He got in the plane, sat on it, strapped it on, and that was it. And then he flew around, he left it in the plane. He had no idea yet, and I'm president of the company, he's going to let me jump. And he said, well, I thought it'd be interesting. I said, interesting? What's wrong with you? And he said, you were the one on the wing. So there was that. And
I'm kind of with him on that one. It's like, if you're silly enough, go right ahead.
yeah, you want to jump to your death to a golf
Yeah,
course?
I'll
Have at
miss
it.
you. Yeah. Is there anything you want me to tell your wife? Okay, bye.
So I climbed back up the wing, stepped back into the cockpit, and didn't jump. But I was right on, toes on the trailing edge of the wing. I was ready to go. And the casual comment, do these things work? I don't know. They came with the plane. Saved my life. And then down
I
in nostalgia row.
Yeah,
Go
and
ahead.
we're going to talk about Dr. Napoleon Hill because he loved that Learjet, but keep going.
Uh, he said, be sure you tell him about your time at San Quentin. Well, I had left Holiday Magic. I had plenty of money, but there was no new money coming in. I was bored out of my skull. I'm sitting in the office on top of my house in Marin County and looking out and across a little inlet that came off of San Francisco Bay was the base of the San Rafael Richmond Bridge, then a hill, which prevented you from really seeing what was behind it, except picking up was a smokestack or a steam stack, whatever, tall pillar of stone that you could see over from behind the hill. I'm thinking, what is that? And I said, oh, I know what it is. It has something to do with San Quentin. I know what I'll do. I'd sort of started the encounter group thing, at least restarted it in the 60s with leadership dynamics. And I thought, I'll bet you I could talk them into doing a thing over there. And on the way over, I made a contact, got in touch with a warden. Red Nelson was his name. And so on the way over there and on the way over, I thought of the name I wanted to use, People Builders. And so by the time I got there, I had it all in my head. I'm Ben Gay with People Builders, and here's what I want to do. And I gave him a proposal, and he was really quite excited about it. He said, yeah, do you think you could change some lives? And I said, it's what I do for a living, so I think so. And he said, what's this going to cost? And I pulled a figure out of the air. Keep in mind, this is 40 years ago. I said $20,000 a year, once, which would be $200,000 a year now. Once a week, 12 hours. I come in, let's say on a Friday night at 6 o'clock. They've already had dinner, and we work together through the night till 6 o'clock Saturday morning. The only thing I need is clearance so that they can stay out of their cells and be counted in the classroom. He said, well, that's doable. And he says, I like it. So he buzzes somebody, and this lady comes in, and he says, whatever her name was, Mr. Gay is going to be doing a thing for us, and I need some paperwork to get it cleared. I'll come in, do a seminar live. The lady, she disappears, comes back with a stack of papers about a foot high. And being a salesman, I'm not real good on details and filling out forms and so on. I just want to talk to you, shake hands, and be done. And I said, and he says, just have your secretary, somebody fill this out, and then I'm going to push it through. And I said, what does push it through mean? He said, I can get it cleared, I guarantee you, in less than 2 years. And I said, what if we did it for free? He said, we could start this afternoon. So I said, fine, let's do it. I wanted to get out of the house and do something productive, and I figured on a resume it'd probably read pretty well. So within 2 hours of that conversation, I was standing in front of several hundred people in the Jewish chapel at San Quentin, giving my first People Builders lecture. A young white millionaire comes in to lecture, primarily minority groups, not 100%, but a healthy percentage were Hispanic or Black or whatever. And if you ever saw Scared Straight, it was a movie done at Rahway State Prison where they bring in kids that were sort of on the wrong path and scare the hell out of them so that they wouldn't want to do anything to come to prison. Well, this is sort of Scared Straight in reverse. Young white millionaire yells, screams at people so that they'll quit doing and not do again what they already did to get there. And with that, I became sort of a staff inmate. And if anybody's listening who's ever done time, that may not sound like a compliment because you don't want to be the snitch that works with the staff. But to get what I needed done, I had to get in with the staff to open doors and gates and so on. So it got to the point where I could go anywhere in the prison without an escort, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, except death row. and I could go there, but I couldn't open the door by myself. And I chose not to go there. I didn't want to go in and stare at people like I was at a zoo or something. So I never went in death row. I did sit in the gas chamber, though. But I wandered around the prison sometimes at 2 in the morning or whatever, if there was something going on where the class had to stop for a few minutes. And with 3,200 inmates, most of them there for some violent crime. And I guess I was young and bulletproof and ignorant. I never sensed any fear. Should have, but I never did. Until one night I came into the prison and Lieutenant Terry Wooster waved at me instead of going right to the chapel. I went over to the guard shack he was in. I said, "Hey, what's up?" He said, "Well, there's a guy in class who's, when he came through the metal detector, it went off like a Christmas tree." And I said, "Oh, so what'd you do with him?" He said, "Well, I let him go in the class because I knew you'd want to use this as a learning experience." I said, "Do I look stupid? You've got somebody in there with a shank large enough to set off the metal detectors all
Yeah.
over the prison, and I'm looking for a learning experience." He said, "Well, we can go in and arrest him, or you can use it to your advantage, your choice." I said, "All
Hmm.
right, I'll go in, but let's have somebody just wandering and sit in the back of the room." By somebody, I meant a correctional officer, which they used to do all the time anyway, so that wouldn't set off any alarms. So I walked to the front of the room and I said, I probably said ladies and gentlemen out of habit, but gentlemen, uh, we have an opportunity here to learn. I'm told that someone and by that time I'd found out he was sent in by one of the gangs, and his initiation was to kill me, and they would let him in the black mafia or the Mexican mafia or the whatever gang he was trying to join. And so I'll just paraphrase it and cut it short, but the gist of it was, I'm told there's someone in here with a 12-inch shank who's been sent to kill me and get in some gang. Well, I got good news and bad news. I'm killable. I'm not armed. The bad news is you won't get out of this room alive. I have some lifetime friends in here who were blood brothers and have formed a real bond. So if you kill me, which you can do, they will kill you without even getting into a gang. So you have a decision to make. Last time you had a decision to make, you chose stupidly and you wound up in San Quentin, probably not for the first time. We have an opportunity now to make a correct turn and survive. So here's the deal. You take your knife, throw it out on the floor, or take your knife up and come in and stab me in the back, and I'll put my head down on the lectern with my back to you, and we're going to have an intelligence test. So I turned around, put my head down. I might have said a few more things. I really wasn't anxious to die. But if you have to back down in prison, that means you'll be backing down the rest of your time in prison. You don't want to do that if at all possible. So I turned my back, put my head down, and dead silence in the room for 60 seconds, I'm guessing. And then there was a scuff of a foot right behind me. I mean, right behind me. And I thought, "Oh, Bengay, you have screwed up." Well, it turned out that was just a guy sitting on the front row who got frustrated and nervous, and he moved the position of his foot. And seconds after that, the clatter of the knife hitting the cement floor where somebody had tossed it out into the middle of the room. It clattered and to the ground, and there was mild applause. And I said, "Is it over?" And they said, "Yeah, Mr. Gay, he's changed his mind." So I picked up the knife, brought it home. I still have it. The handle to prevent fingerprints and give a better grip is wrapped in torn up underwear, and then the most of it is a blade that they had filed down over months, sitting on their cell floor, dragging it back and forth and turning a file they had stolen from the metal shop into a knife, into an honest to God prison shank. And so it ended. I never knew who it was, but I congratulated whoever you are. You made a smart decision. This isn't going out of this room. I'm not going to tell the warden. We're not going to shake down your cell or whatever. You made a great decision. Congratulations. Now let's get on with the class. So between flying under the Golden Gate Bridge, trying to fly through the St. Louis Arch, trying to parachute from 8,000 or 9,000 feet over a golf course with what may or may not have been a workable parachute, and 5 years, once a week at least, 12 hours at San Quentin, looking back, walking through situations I never should have been in. But when people say, what good have you done in the business you've chosen, which is the people building business, really, although I've concentrated on salespeople and public speaking, the most rewarding work I ever did was in San Quentin and at a women's prison in California called Frontera, there to a much lesser degree. That was the most meaningful work. One last little point on bragging, and we'll get back to real business. When I got to San Quentin, the recidivism rate was 67%. That means 67% of the people that did their term, did their sentence, and got out were back in prison within 2 years. The graduates of People Builders, by the time they graduated, just one cycle, we called them a graduate, it was a 12-week cycle, but most that joined stayed in for the number of cycles they were there in San Quentin. I had people do from the first night to the last night I was there 5 years of 12-week cycles. Of those people, instead of a 67% recidivism rate, the recidivism rate was 5%. So that's the most important work I've ever done. They had to do the hard work, but I inspired them to do things that they hadn't tried before. And for that, I will be eternally grateful for what they taught me. Oh, and one cute little thing, speaking of recidivism rate, I was at home reading the local paper, and there'd been an attempted breakout at San Quentin sometime during that week. And so Friday night I go in, Officer Evans waves me through the gate. I park and go up and head to the gate, and there's Terry Wooster standing there. And I said, Terry, how are you? They had tried to tunnel out and almost made it, but they got curious as to where they were and tunneled up to make sure that they were in the right place. They were trying to get to San Francisco Bay, punch out on the side of the hill and creep away in the night. And they raised their little flap up, and they were looking right in the guard's snack bar. And when they
That's not funny. Yes, it is. It's very funny.
yeah,
Sorry.
lifted the flap, he's looking right in the eyes of a correctional officer eating a hamburger. And he lowered the flap, but it was too late. So they plugged the hole they could find inside the prison and made sure they didn't go any farther than that. So I said to Lieutenant Wooster, I read about the attempted break. Were any People Builders involved? And he gave me one of the greatest compliments I ever had. He was a graduate of People Builders, as were lots of staff also. But he said, no, if they were People Builders, they'd have made it. This is the head of the correction officers in the prison, a proud member of People Builders, and he was equally proud that he belonged to an organization that would have escaped.
Well, that does make sense. And I have to tell you, and we've shared this before on the show, and we will get to the chapter in just a moment because there are some reasons why we're talking about this, but I honestly thought, I mean, I didn't know this about the shank, and kind of wish I still didn't know it, but one of the scariest stories you've ever told me was about Charles Manson.
Yeah, that was, I spent some time in his, again, it was Terry Wooster. He was sort of my
Mm,
guardian. He's the one that anytime I had a problem or wanted to do something or have the class do something, I just said to Terry, who had talked to the warden, and the warden said, within reason, let him do what he wants to do. So I walk into through the main gate into the courtyard that's inside the prison, and the Jewish chapel fronted onto that. And there's Terry Wooster one day. He said, Dan, I got a guy who wants to meet you. I said, well, tell him to come on down. And come on down to the class. He said, well, this one can't come on down. And I said, well, I don't really do death row. And he said, he's not on death row anymore. I said, anymore? And he'd gotten his sentence reduced from death to life without possibility of parole, and he was in the adjustment center. I said, well, who is it? And he said, well, he's looking at us right now because that's how come he asked about you. He watches you come in every Friday night and watches you go out every Saturday morning, 12 hours later, and a group of people greet you. And he said, who is that guy? He became fascinated by it. I said, okay, who is he? And he said, Charlie Manson. And this is back when all that stuff was much fresher in people's minds. We have listeners now who might not know who Charlie Manson is, but he was the baddest of the bad and the craziest of the crazy. I said, so how do I meet him? He said, I'll clear your way into the adjustment center. You go up there and meet with him. So I said, fine. And I'm assuming that I'm going to go up with armed guards and so on, although I didn't have to. And one of the correctional officers said, Mr. Gay, I was told you were coming, walks me up. I think it was either 3 or 4 levels of where the cells are stacked on top of each other. And he walks me down to the end, and there is Charlie, looking just like Charlie Manson. By then he had the swastika carved into his forehead, long crazy hair, etc. And so the guard opened the thing and let me in this cell, locked it behind me. I expected that. And then said, all right, let me know when you just yell when you want to come. And he walks away. And I'm thinking, I'm in here with Charlie Manson, who he didn't directly kill anybody, but he directed others to kill many people. And he's known to be a lunatic. And I'm locked in the cell with him. That's the bad news. Good news is he was a little bitty guy, sort of like, he reminded me of Sammy Davis Jr., tiny guy. He wasn't any physical threat. I'm not a killer myself. However, I really didn't fear him physically. So I really wanted to get into how did he do that? And rather quickly, I discovered when he looked in your eyes, he looked in the front of your eyes and out the back of your head. I told Jimmy Rucker when we were talking about him one day, I said, Jimmy, just be very grateful that when we were wandering around laughing and giggling but didn't really know what life was about or what we were about, be glad that we didn't go to Haight-Ashbury in San Francisco and bump into this guy. Had we might have been involved in some much more serious stuff than we were, like being in Sharon Tate's house the night they slaughtered all those people.
Right.
So, and one little amusing thing, he had in his whole cell, he had his clothes stacked up on the upper bunk. It was in a 2-man cell, but no one wanted a room with him, so he was the only one in a 2-man cell. He had his clothes on the top bunk, used it like a bookshelf, and a book. And the book was How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie. And I said, I thought he just checked it out of the prison library or something. I said, what a interesting book. He said, yeah, I take that with me everywhere where I go. He said, it's my Bible. I couldn't have built the Manson family without it. And that was probably the first time I had a clear idea of you can use a gun to protect your family and do good, or you can use a gun and go kill 18 people at a school. The gun isn't the issue, it's what you do with the gun. How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie wasn't the issue. the lessons within it and how to get people to do things you want them to do was the issue. And that was his Bible. So I visited with him 3 times, 3 hours each. People have asked me why I know that. It's because I wanted the count to have cleared when I get there, because they freeze everything in the prison while they're counting. And I wanted to be gone before the next count started, which is every 4 hours. And the reason is, if it doesn't clear, Charlie and I would be trapped together for hours or days. I took a guy over to the class one night as a gift. He worked with TWA Airlines. His name was Yuki Sano. He went up at a break. He went up to somebody's cell because he wanted the experience of being locked in. And I said, fine, I can get that done. So he got locked in, and the count didn't clear. Yuki Sano sat in somebody's cell for, as best I recall, like 12 hours. I went home and then called his wife, and she said, oh, when is Yuki getting home? I said, well, we have a little problem with Yuki. He's locked in a cell at San Quentin, and I don't know, but we'll get him out as soon as we can. So I could go on and on and on with San Quentin stories. I've got 12 hours times 52 weeks times 5 years of the most interesting work I've ever done. And I have dear friends from that experience to today.
Who's that?
Some are correctional officers, and some I met as convicts, inmates in the class.
Oh, and I do want to go into this because, as you mentioned earlier, and people say, well, what does this have to do with sales? It has to do with persuasion. Sales
Yes.
equals persuasion. And that book that was his Bible, I've got that book. I'm not sure I'll be able to read it ever again, but I've got it. By golly.
It's
It's
a
a
great
bit
book. Charlie
terrifying.
misused it.
He
Yeah.
did. He really did.
As
But
you read it again, you'll probably see places where you go, oh, I see where Charlie might have
yeah,
gotten that idea.
yeah, I'm not nuts. He was. Okay, keep moving. But yeah, that is a scare. He's dead now, isn't he? Didn't he die some time
Yes, he
ago?
died. I'm guessing I didn't write it in my diary, but a couple of
Right.
years ago at
Yeah,
age
that's what I
80.
thought.
Yeah,
Yeah, he was allowed to
he,
live way too long, in my opinion, but yeah, you gotta do what you gotta do.
um, I'm with you.
Yeah, it
He
doesn't
was, by
make
the way,
sense.
if any of our listeners saw him on with Geraldo Rivera, Geraldo went in and had the San Quentin experience, and in that interview, he was talking about Charlie and how crazy he was, and Charlie was going booga booga booga, with his hands up by his forehead and screaming and yelling and so on. And I forget whether I saw that before or after I met him, but anyway, we'll blend the stories together. Sitting there, and I hear a guard coming down the walkway, down the tier, and I hear his keys rattling. Well, that means I want you to know I'm here. If I don't want you to know I'm here, I hold the keys, and I'm right up on you before you know it. I'm looking at you the first time you know I'm in the vicinity. Well, this guy's rattling his keys. And so I didn't think much about it one way or the other. I knew he wasn't up to anything. And we were talking, and Charlie said to me, excuse me. And he pauses just a second. And when the guard gets right in front of his cell, he runs over to the bars and he goes, booga, 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 like he did with Geraldo at the guard. And the guard didn't even look at him. He just kept walking. He said, hi, Charlie, how are you?
Oh,
And then Charlie
gee.
came back over and sat down on the bunk, and he said, they love that. So, he was putting on a show. So he was crazy, but he
Yeah.
wasn't Geraldo crazy. He
I'm
was
glad you said
crazy.
that because I think Geraldo's a lunatic, but that's just my personal opinion.
I've never met him and don't really know. Egotistical crosses my mind,
Yeah,
but
there is
the
that.
yeah. But anyway, he got taken for a ride. Charlie Manson was perfectly capable of sitting with you and talking like a normal human being. and weave a spell on you. And Booga 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 was all show.
The human brain really is astonishing and in so many ways, but we could talk forever about that. But we've got about 10 more minutes. So to get back into our book and sales and marketing and persuasion, it's kind of all the same thing. What I wanted to do is very quickly, because this is not a terribly long chapter, and I do invite people to go read The Closers, Part 2, page 71, Save as Much as You Want. And there were three basic elements to the issue that our person in the chapter you were talking about said the basic elements. Number one, the business is profitable as is, but he's charging half of what he could and should be. Two, most of his clients are on a month-to-month basis with no contracts. You can't do that anymore. Three, the bank won't loan construction money for his new building without contracts that had to be worth at least twice the value of the construction loan. And four, his objectives were to get 100% of his clients into signed contracts without losing a single client. And that sounds impossible, but it wasn't. And all this at the same time, doubling his sales volume, and as a result, getting his new building financed. So, how did you work this out? What advice
Well,
did you give him?
as the chapter, it's not only advice I gave him, it's advice I gave myself over the years. As it goes on in the chapter, uh, we put people on you have an option. It was an alternate choice close. If you want to continue on, no contract, handshake agreement, etc., fine. But you will be susceptible to price increases, because as we go along, we're obviously going to raise our prices, and you'll be susceptible to that. However, if you want to sign an agreement, I will let you save as much as you want to save. In other words, we're handshake month to month now at, I'll just throw out a number, $500 a month for X amount of time. But if you want to sign an agreement, then I will extend that into the future, into infinity. I'll sign a 20-year contract with you that your prices can't go up from $500 a month. So you can do it but you have to pay for whatever
Right.
length of time that is.
But they're grandfathered
So,
in. Nothing is going to change. Like now, these days, and
right.
this bugs the heck out of me. Oh, you've got a lifetime access. No, you don't. And that
Yeah.
bothers me
Yeah.
more than, and I'll see some great marketing. Oh, you're going to have lifetime access. And my eyebrows immediately hit my hairline because I know it's baloney. It's not going to
Yeah, it's
happen.
not only baloney. The first question I always ask if I'm talking to somebody about a thing like that is, whose lifetime?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And, what's going to happen to change it? And, when are you going to start lying to me? And when do I have to go to Trustpilot to turn on you? So that's a whole nother thing. So, okay, keep going, Ben.
and the other advantage nowadays with the internet, there's so much information flowing. In my early days in business, we decided what the price should be, and we printed up 500,000 flyers or whatever, and stacked them in the warehouse and started selling. And if the price was too high or too low, we got 500,000 flyers there stating the price we wish we hadn't stated. And we're either sort of locked in or we're throwing out a huge amount of paper and printing costs, etc. What I slowly discovered with the internet is people don't remember from 1 minute to the next what your offer was. If they have a deal with you, they probably remember that deal. They've got a piece of paperwork that says what the deal is. But for the internet first-time user, or they looked at it and didn't pay attention, all I do now to change the price is I change it. Or I have our folks, as I laughingly call Gigi, have Gigi change the price, go from this price to this price, up or down, based on what I think is going on in the marketplace. And no one, and I mean no one, has ever questioned that. If you're grandfathered in, it doesn't make any difference. I have people that my current speaking fee is $15,000 for anywhere from an hour to all day, and that includes my expenses. Like if you want to nickel and dime me and so on, the fee is $12,500. But you send me the tickets, people.
You still there?
Other people,
Ben, I lost you. Ben, did you lose your volume?
prices on an item.
All I can hear you like you're at the bottom of a water hose.
Trying to find the sweet spot.
Oh, getting closer. Try it again, Ben.
Incredibly well. Back to
Okay, this is not working. Ben, I hate to say this, but I lost you. So what we're going to have to do, and I hope you can hear me, is finish this up next week because we are running a little bit short on time anyway. So next week, yeah, I can hear you kind of, sort of, but not really.
first copy of the closers at a garage sale.
Ben, I can't hear you. I can't hear words you're saying. I'm catching every 15th or 16th word. Anyway, to our audience, thank you for being with us today. Next week, we're going to finish up this, and then we will delve into page 81 of the Closers Part 2, titled Whatever You Do, Don't Sell Out. So thank you, everybody, and we will see you next week. Oh, and by the way, don't forget to send us your sales questions for live answers. We'll answer them every week. Ben, I hope you can, I don't know if you can hear me, but I'm hanging up on you.